The village lay nestled between rolling green hills and ancient forests, where towering baobab trees stood like silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of time. The river, a lifeline of the land, shimmered under the golden sun, its waters carrying whispers of ancestral spirits. Birds with bright feathers danced through the sky, their songs blending with the rustling leaves as the wind wove its unseen magic through the village. Here the people lived in harmony with nature, their lives guided by tradition, wisdom, and the unseen hands of destiny. Among them was a young girl named Nia. She was the kind of child who could light up even the darkest corners with her presence. Her laughter once rang through the village, as soft and pure as the morning breeze. Her eyes, deep and filled with warmth, held dreams bigger than the sky above. But fate had not been kind to her. Her mother, a woman of unmatched kindness and wisdom, had been the heart of her world. She taught Nia the songs of the ancestors, the stories of their people, and the value of a loving heart. Yet, like a flame extinguished too soon, her life was stolen away by an illness no healer could cure. With her mother gone, Nia's father, once a strong and proud man, found himself drowning in sorrow. Seeking comfort and companionship, he remarried, hoping to restore balance to their home. But the woman he brought into their lives was nothing like the wife he had lost. Beneath her sweet words and forced smiles lurked a heart filled with greed and cruelty. To the villagers, she appeared kind and dutiful, a woman eager to care for her new family. But behind closed doors, she saw Nia as nothing more than a burden, a shadow of the past she wished to erase. Days that were once filled with love and laughter soon became endless cycles of labor and silence. Nia, who had once been the cherished daughter of the house, was reduced to little more than a servant. The woman who was meant to care for her now treated her with coldness, feeding her scraps and dressing her in rags. Yet through it all Nia endured. She clung to the belief that fate had a plan, that the ancestors would not abandon her. But destiny, as it often does, had something far greater in store, something neither she nor her cruel stepmother could ever have imagined. There was a time when Nia's world was filled with love, warmth, and the gentle embrace of her mother. Her mother, Adana, was a woman of extraordinary grace, known throughout the village for her kindness and wisdom. She had a voice that could soothe even the most restless child, and when she sang, it felt as if the earth itself paused to listen. She told Nia stories of their ancestors, tales woven with magic, bravery, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. Nia would often sit by the river with her mother, their fingers trailing through the cool water as they watched the fish dart between the reeds. "The river flows, my child," her mother would say, "just as life does. Sometimes it is calm, sometimes it rages, but it always finds its way." Nia never thought much of those words back then, for she could not yet understand their deeper meaning. To her, the world was perfect, unchanging, and safe as long as her mother was by her side. But fate had its own plans. A strange illness came like a shadow in the night, stealing her mother's strength little by little. The village healers did all they could, but the sickness refused to loosen its grip. Nia watched helplessly as the woman who had once carried her so effortlessly now struggled to lift even a cup of water. And then, one fateful morning, Adana closed her eyes for the last time, her final breath carrying a whisper of love to the wind. The days that followed were a blur of sorrow. Nia's father, broken by grief, withdrew into himself. He was a man of great strength, but even the mightiest trees bend under the weight of loss. He spent more time in solitude, walking through the fields with eyes that no longer saw the beauty of the world. It wasn't long before the village elders advised him to remarry. "A man cannot raise a child alone," they said. "You need a wife, and Nia needs a mother." And so he married again. The woman, Isoba, came from a neighboring village, bringing with her sweet words and gentle smiles. At first she appeared to be a blessing. She cooked hearty meals, spoke kindly to Nia, and assured the father that she would care for his daughter as her own. For a while, it seemed as if the darkness that had settled over their home was beginning to lift. But it was all a carefully crafted illusion. As soon as the father's back was turned, the kindness in Isoba's eyes faded. Her patience grew thin, her words sharp. At first it was small things, tasks that Nia had never been asked to do before. "Fetch water," she would say. "Sweep the floor." But as the days passed, the demands grew harsher. Nia was given the smallest portions at mealtime, made to clean from sunrise to sunset, and scolded for the slightest mistake. Her father, still blinded by grief and desperate to believe in the illusion of a happy home, did not see the suffering of his daughter. Isoba knew how to mask her cruelty when he was around, always ensuring that Nia remained silent. And so, little by little, the warmth of Nia's world faded, replaced by the cold hands of fate pulling her toward an uncertain future. The days of laughter and warmth became nothing but distant memories for Nia. The home that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison, and her stepmother, Isoba, was its cruel warden. From the moment the sun peeked over the horizon until long after it had set, Nia's hands never knew rest. She was the first to rise, her feet cold against the dirt floor as she rushed to fetch water from the river before the village awakened. The journey was long, the pot heavy, and the morning air thick with mist. Yet, no matter how quickly she hurried, it was never fast enough for Isoba. "Lazy girl," the woman would snap. "Do you think the household will run itself?" From there, Nia's list of chores stretched endlessly. She scrubbed the floors until her fingers were raw, pounded grain until her arms ached, and tended the fire until the smoke stung her eyes. She washed Isoba's fine clothes, only to be given tattered rags for herself. She cooked meals that filled the house with rich, inviting aromas but was allowed to eat only scraps, cold leftovers if anything at all. The villagers saw glimpses of her suffering, but Isoba had mastered the art of deception. In public, she pretended to be a caring mother, speaking of Nia as if she were a wayward child in need of discipline. "She is strong," she would say, forcing a smile. "Hard work will teach her respect." And so, no one questioned why Nia's once plump cheeks had hollowed, why her hands bore calluses no child should have, or why her eyes no longer shone with the same youthful light. Her father, the one person who might have protected her, was slipping further from her reach. The weight of grief had aged him and soon he fell ill. His once powerful frame grew frail, his voice weak. He spent more time resting, unaware of the way Isoba tightened her grip on the household. Whenever he asked about Nia, his wife reassured him, "She is well, my husband. She is learning how to be a proper woman." And in his weakened state he believed her. Despite everything, Nia refused to let cruelty harden her heart. In the stolen moments between her endless labor, she found solace in the little things: a cool breeze through the trees, the distant sound of drumming from the village square, the memory of her mother's voice. Some nights, when the sky stretched wide above her, she whispered to the stars, asking the ancestors if they could hear her. She did not know when or how, but deep within her, she held on to one unshakable truth: this was not the end of her story. Fate had not abandoned her, it was merely waiting for the right moment to change her path. Isoba had always been a woman driven by greed. When she first married Nia's father, she had hoped to inherit his wealth and live a life of ease. But with his growing illness, the household struggled, and the comfort she had once enjoyed began to fade. The more she tasted misfortune, the more she resented Nia, blaming the girl for every hardship. One evening, as Isoba sat in the village square, listening to traders boast about their goods, her ears caught wind of an intriguing conversation. A wealthy merchant had arrived from distant lands, a man known for dealing in rare treasures, beads, jewelry, and if the rumors were true, even slaves. His name was Abadil, and he was feared as much as he was respected. His riches were unmatched, but his heart was as cold as stone. Isoba watched as he displayed his goods, strings of beads shimmering like captured sunlight. The colors were unlike anything she had ever seen: deep blues that mirrored the ocean, reds as rich as fresh blood, and golden beads that glowed even in the dim firelight. Women gasped in admiration, offering baskets of grain, rolls of fine cloth, even livestock in exchange for a single strand. But Abadil merely smirked, rejecting offers without hesitation. Isoba's heart burned with desire. If she could get her hands on those beads, she would be the envy of every woman in the village. She imagined the respect, the admiration, the whispered praises. But she had nothing to offer. Unless... The idea crept into her mind like a serpent, coiling around her thoughts, whispering in her ear. She had something of value, something Abadil might want. That night she sought him out in secret. Beneath the cover of darkness they struck a deal. "A girl, you say?" Abadil mused, stroking his beard. "Young, strong, and obedient?" Isoba nodded eagerly. "She is worthless to me," she lied. "But perhaps she would be useful to you." The trader chuckled, his gold rings glinting in the firelight. "Perhaps," he said. "I will take her." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small leather pouch, tossing it to Isoba. She caught it with trembling hands and opened it, her breath catching at the sight of the beads inside. "Tomorrow," Abadil said, his voice like a blade. "Have the girl ready. There will be no changing your mind." Isoba didn't hesitate. She had made her choice. Nia's fate was sealed. "You said." The morning air was thick with silence as Nia stood outside their hut, unaware that her life was about to change forever. She had spent the night dreaming of her mother, of a time when love surrounded her like the warm embrace of the sun. But when she awoke, it was to the cold stare of her stepmother, who ordered her to get dressed in what little rags she owned. Confused, Nia obeyed, her heart hammering in her chest. Something felt wrong. Isoba's voice lacked its usual sharpness, replaced by an eerie calmness that unsettled her. Before she could ask any questions, she was led away from the house, her feet dragging against the dusty ground. Waiting at the edge of the village was a man unlike any she had ever seen. His robes were made of fine cloth, his fingers adorned with thick gold rings that glinted under the sun. His eyes, cold and calculating, studied her like one would examine a piece of livestock. "She will do," he muttered. Without another word, he grabbed Nia's arm and pulled her toward the waiting caravan. Panic surged through her. "Mama Isoba," she cried, using the respectful title despite the woman's cruelty. "Where are we going? Where is Baba?" Isoba did not look at her. Instead, she clutched the small pouch of beads tighter, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Realization hit Nia like a crushing wave. She had been sold. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled against the trader's iron grip. "No. Baba wouldn't allow this. He doesn't know." She turned, her voice rising in desperation. "Please let me see him. Let me." A sharp slap silenced her. The sting burned across her cheek, but the pain in her heart was far greater. "Enough," the trader snapped. "You belong to me now." The villagers turned away, pretending not to see. In their eyes, Nia was just another unfortunate girl caught in the merciless grip of fate. The journey was long and grueling. The trader treated her as nothing more than cargo, giving her only enough food to keep her alive. At night, she curled up on the hard ground, her body aching from the day's harsh travels. Every time she thought of her father, of the home she had been stolen from, fresh tears would spill from her tired eyes. Had he already realized she was gone? Or was he still lying in bed, too weak to notice the silence of the house? With every step further from her village, despair crept deeper into her soul. But in the darkest moments, she turned to the only source of hope she had left, the ancestors. She whispered to them in the quiet of the night, her voice barely above a breath. "Please," she pleaded. "If you can hear me, guide me. Do not let this be my end." The stars blinked above her, silent but watchful. Nia did not know if they would answer. But she clung to the hope that somewhere, somehow, fate had not abandoned her yet. The night was restless, the sky dark and brooding. Thick clouds swallowed the moon, and the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of a storm. The caravan had stopped at the edge of a vast forest, its towering trees stretching toward the heavens like ancient guardians. The place was known in whispers, an enchanted land where spirits roamed, and only the foolish dared to linger. The trader and his men huddled near the fires, their laughter and voices carrying over the restless night. They had little fear, believing that their weapons and numbers made them untouchable. Nia, however, lay curled against the rough wooden cart, shivering not just from the cold but from exhaustion. Her body ached, her mind heavy with despair. Each breath felt like a battle against the weight of hopelessness. Then without warning the wind shifted. The laughter of the men died down, replaced by the uneasy shuffling of feet. The fire flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows against the trees. Someone, was near. A sudden gust of wind sent sparks flying, and in that brief moment of confusion, a figure emerged from the darkness. Cloaked in black, face hidden behind a carved wooden mask, the warrior moved like a phantom. Before the guards could react, the warrior struck. A blade flashed, cutting through the night as one of the trader's men fell to the ground with a pained cry. Chaos erupted. The trader bellowed orders, his men scrambling to unsheathe their weapons, but the warrior was faster. Moving like the wind itself, they dodged, parried, and struck with lethal precision. Nia barely had the strength to move, her weary eyes struggling to follow the battle before her. The trader, realizing that his men were no match for this mysterious warrior, turned to flee. But he was not fast enough. A final strike sent him sprawling to the ground, his precious bag of beads scattering into the dirt. Silence fell. Nia, too weak to understand what had just happened, felt herself slipping away. The last thing she saw was the masked figure kneeling beside her, strong arms lifting her from the ground. Then darkness. When she awoke, the world around her had changed. No longer was she surrounded by the rough camp of the traders. Instead, she lay on a soft woven mat, the scent of fresh herbs and burning incense filling the air. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself inside a grand hut, its walls adorned with intricate carvings and shimmering fabrics. The air was warm, filled with the distant sound of drums and the murmurs of voices just outside. She was no longer in the hands of her captors. But where was she? And who was the masked warrior who had saved her from a fate worse than death? Nia awoke slowly, her body still aching from exhaustion. The scent of herbs and burning incense filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh rain. The soft glow of firelight flickered against the intricately woven walls of the hut, casting shadows that danced like spirits. For a brief moment she panicked, her mind racing back to the harsh journey, the cruel traitor, the cold ground beneath her as she lay helpless. But then she remembered, the masked warrior, the battle, the feeling of strong arms lifting her from the dirt. Where was she? She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed against her shoulder. "Rest, child," a soft voice murmured. Nia turned her head to see an elderly woman dressed in flowing robes, her face lined with wisdom but kind in its expression. "You are safe now." Before Nia could ask anything, the sound of approaching footsteps made her look toward the doorway. A group of people entered, their movements graceful yet strong. Among them stood a regal figure, a woman adorned with golden beads and a crown made of woven reeds and precious stones. Her presence commanded silence, her dark eyes filled with knowledge that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. Nia knew at once that this was no ordinary woman. "You have found your way to us," the woman spoke, her voice steady and warm. "Welcome to the kingdom of the hidden people." The hidden people. Nia had heard whispers of them in stories told by the elders back in her village. A mystical tribe, unseen by most, protectors of the lost and the oppressed. They were said to live deep within the forests, their homes shielded by magic, their ways known only to those deemed worthy. As if sensing her thoughts, the queen smiled. "Yes, child, we are real." She stepped forward, placing a hand on Nia's forehead. "And fate has brought you to us for a reason." Nia lowered her gaze. "I don't know why I am here," she admitted. "I am just an unfortunate girl who was sold for beads." The queen knelt before her, tilting Nia's chin up so that their eyes met. "You are more than that," she said firmly. "I see something in you, something strong. You have endured suffering but you did not let it break you. That is a rare gift." Tears pricked Nia's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her this way before, not since her mother had passed. The queen stood. "If you wish, you may stay here. You will learn our ways, our traditions. And in time, you will discover your true purpose." For the first time in what felt like forever, hope bloomed in Nia's chest. She accepted. The days that followed were unlike anything she had known. She was no longer treated as a burden, no longer forced to endure cruelty. Instead, she was taught, nurtured, and given a place among the people. She trained with the healers, learning the secrets of medicinal herbs and how to mend wounds with careful hands. She sat with the storytellers, memorizing the legends of their ancestors and the lessons hidden within them. She observed the warriors, studying their movements, their strength, their unbreakable unity. Most importantly, she learned the power of leadership. The queen guided her personally, showing her how to listen, how to make decisions not with impulse, but with wisdom. "You have the heart of a leader," the queen told her one evening as they sat beneath the stars. "One day, you will understand why fate led you here." Nia did not know what the future held. But for the first time she believed in the possibility of something greater. Years passed, and Nia was no longer the frail, frightened girl who had once been sold for beads. Under the guidance of the hidden people, she had grown into a woman of strength, wisdom, and resilience. Her hands, once calloused from servitude, now healed the sick. Her voice, once silenced by fear, now carried stories that inspired those who listened. She had become one of them, a protector, a leader in the making. Her transformation had not come easily. She had trained tirelessly, waking before dawn to master the art of survival. She ran through the dense forests, learning how to track, how to move unseen, how to fight when necessary. She memorized the language of the wind, the whispers of the rivers, the songs of the ancestors that echoed in the stillness of the night. One evening, as she sat with the queen beneath the sacred baobab tree, the older woman spoke words that changed everything. "I knew you would come," she said, her deep eyes filled with knowing. Nia frowned. "What do you mean?" The queen reached for a staff carved with symbols of the past. "Long before you arrived, the ancestors sent me a vision. I saw a girl lost and broken, but destined for greatness. I saw a fire in her spirit that could not be extinguished. That girl was you, Nia?" A chill ran down Nia's spine. She had always believed she was nothing more than an unfortunate soul, cast aside and forgotten. But the queen's words held a deeper meaning, one that stirred something within her. "There is more," the the queen continued, her voice steady but solemn. Your bloodline is not that of an ordinary girl. You are of royal descent. Nia's breath caught. Royal? The queen nodded. Your true parents were the rulers of a powerful kingdom, one that was lost to treachery and greed. Before you could take your place, your family was betrayed, and the kingdom fell into the hands of an impostor. You were taken away, hidden, your identity erased to protect you. Nia's heart pounded. The world she thought she had known was unraveling before her eyes. You were never meant to live as a servant, nor were you meant to be sold like a possession, the queen said. The ancestors have spoken. The time will come when you must reclaim what is rightfully yours. A mixture of emotions surged through Nia: shock, disbelief, but above all, an unshakable sense of purpose. The suffering she had endured, the cruelty of her past, had not been meaningless. They had forged her, prepared her for something far greater than she had ever imagined. She looked up at the night sky, the stars shining like the eyes of her ancestors watching over her. The prophecy had been set in motion. Her destiny awaited. Her journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Far away from the hidden kingdom, in the village where Nia had once lived, misfortune struck like a vengeful storm. Isoba, once so proud and greedy, now found herself drowning in misery. The beads she had exchanged for Nia, the very treasures that had made her heart swell with selfish delight, had turned to dust before her eyes. One moment, they had gleamed like precious jewels in her hands, and the next they crumbled into nothingness, carried away by the wind like the ashes of her wickedness. At first she refused to believe it. She clawed at the empty pouch, shaking it in desperation, but there was nothing left, no sign that the beads had ever existed. A cold dread settled in her chest. This was no ordinary misfortune. This was a curse. From that day forward, nothing in her life remained the same. Her livestock fell ill and perished one by one. The food in her home spoiled overnight, maggots crawling through the grain she had stored so carefully. The villagers, who had once tolerated her because of her husband's standing, now whispered behind her back, their eyes filled with suspicion and scorn. But her worst fate awaited when her husband, Nia's father, finally learned the truth. One evening, as he lay weak and feverish, a kind-hearted elder from the village knelt by his side and spoke words that sent fire through his veins. Your wife has betrayed you, the elder murmured. She sold your daughter for mere beads. The words sliced through him like a blade. His weak hands trembled as he pushed himself up, his eyes blazing with fury. Where is my child? He demanded, but there was no answer to be given. Summoning what little strength he had left, he called for Isoba, his voice like thunder even in his weakened state. When she arrived, he looked at her, not with love, not with sorrow, but with the deepest loathing a man could muster. Tell me it is not true, he rasped. But she could not. The truth was written in her downcast eyes, in the shame that finally gripped her like an unrelenting hand. You are no wife of mine, he spat. No mother, no woman of honor. You are a curse upon this home. And with that, he banished her from the village. Isoba, who had once dreamed of wealth and power, now wandered the land with nothing. The fine clothes she had treasured turned to rags. The food she once hoarded was now something she begged for. The people who once feared her name turned their backs on her. Every night, she whispered to the wind, hoping to take back what she had done. But the ancestors did not answer. Years had passed, and the girl who had once been cast away had returned, not as a victim but as a leader. Nia rode at the head of a small procession, her presence commanding the respect of all who laid eyes on her. She was no longer the weak, helpless girl who had been forced into servitude. Dressed in the royal garments of the hidden people, adorned with symbols of wisdom and strength, she carried herself with the grace of a queen. As she entered the village, silence fell. People emerged from their huts, their eyes widening in recognition. Some gasped, others whispered among themselves. Could it truly be her, the child they had once pitied, the girl they had thought lost forever? But it was her. And she had returned, not for vengeance, but for justice. Nia walked through the familiar pathways of her childhood, taking in the broken homes, the weary faces of those who had suffered under poor leadership. The village had struggled in her absence, weighed down by misfortune and neglect. She knew then that she had not just returned for herself, she had returned for them. She called the villagers together, addressing them as an equal, not as a ruler above them. She spoke of unity, of rebuilding what had been lost. She promised prosperity, wisdom, and protection. And with the skills she had learned from the hidden people, she set to work, helping to restore the village's strength. Then from the shadows a figure emerged. A frail woman, draped in tattered rags, eyes sunken with hunger and regret. It was Isoba. She fell to her knees before Nia, her voice hoarse with desperation. "Forgive me," she wept. "I was blinded by greed. I have suffered for my sins, but no punishment is greater than the shame I carry in my heart." The villagers watched in silence, waiting for Nia's judgment. Many expected her to cast Isoba out forever, to repay cruelty with cruelty. But Nia was no longer that frightened girl, nor was she one to let hatred rule her heart. "You took everything from me," she said, her voice firm but calm. "Yet I will not become what you were." She looked down at the woman who had once tormented her, now nothing more than a shadow of her former self. "I will not punish you," Nia declared. "But you will never again have power over another." She ordered the villagers to ensure Isoba was given food and shelter but made it clear she would never be allowed to manipulate or harm anyone again. The decision stunned many, but those who truly understood Nia knew, her strength was not just in her ability to lead but in her ability to forgive. And so, the village flourished under Nia's guidance, restored not just in spirit, but in prosperity. She had come home, not to take revenge but to bring healing. And in doing so she had truly triumphed. Nia's story did not remain within the boundaries of her village, it traveled far and wide, whispered by storytellers around flickering fires, sung by travelers who carried her name across distant lands. It became more than just a tale, it became a legend, a testament to the power of fate and the strength of a kind heart. People spoke of the girl who had been cast aside, sold for mere beads, only to rise as a leader, a protector of the weak. They spoke of the cruel stepmother whose greed led to her downfall, and of the hidden people, the mystical guardians who had shaped Nia into the woman she had become. But most of all they spoke of destiny's justice. The ancestors had watched in silence, their judgment unseen but always present. Greed had been punished. Isoba, once so consumed by selfish desires, had been left with nothing but regret. The wicked traitor who had taken Nia never found prosperity again. Misfortune followed him like a shadow, his riches slipping through his fingers until he was left with nothing. And the innocent, Nia, had been rewarded not with gold, but with something far greater, purpose. She did not stop with the salvation of her village. With the wisdom she had gained, she traveled beyond, seeking out others who had been abandoned, betrayed, or forgotten. She rescued children from cruel masters, freed those who had been sold like she once had, and shared the knowledge of the hidden people with those willing to listen. Wherever she went, she left hope in her wake. And so, as the years passed, Nia's name became more than just a memory. It became a lesson, a reminder that fate does not forget, that the ancestors do not turn a blind eye. The story of the girl who was sold for beads, but rose to greatness, was told for generations, each retelling a tribute to the power of resilience, kindness, and justice. For in the end, destiny had not forsaken her. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal its plan. She had sealed her own fate, and there was no undoing it.